Welcome to the CQC video training series. This is a spot topic video on field, variable, and static interface widgets. If you've been through any of the previous training videos that dealt with the user interface system, you may have noticed that many widget types come in three variations, that being field-based, variable-based, and static. In this video, we are going to go through each of these three types, discuss the pros and cons of each type and why you might use them and under what circumstances. So we'll go ahead and get started first with field-based widgets. As you might imagine, the most obvious difference for field-based widgets is that they operate on fields, as would be expected. And this, in turn, has two other side effects. That means that any changes that you make are system-wide, and they are immediately visible to all other CQC clients and even servers as well, meaning background servers such as the event server that are monitoring fields in order to react to them and so forth. So they are immediately system-wide and everyone can see them. So this obviously lends itself towards a particular sort of use, which is the direct manipulation of the devices under CQC's control. This isn't something that you can do locally where you make some changes and then once you're happy with them, then you commit to them. As soon as you make a change to a field, it's seen by everyone. So it's for immediate use within the system for manipulating devices. So let's take a look at that. And here I just have a set of one of each. And for the field one here, we have a field Boolean image. So it is controlled by a field, which is telling it to display one image or another. And then there's a little checkbox here, which is just basically toggling the value of that field that it's associated with. So if we look at the interface viewer here, if I click the checkbox, the field immediately responds. So even though there's no connection between these, when I modify the field, it's immediately seen by anything out there on CQC land that is monitoring this field. Variable-based widgets are very similar to fields, but they have one very important advantage for certain circumstances. As with fields, they are a value that's stored and can be read back. So that means that you can allow the user to make some sort of selection and you can remember that and you can display it to the user because it's a persisted value that stays around. But it is also the case that each touchscreen client has their own set of variables, so they don't interfere with each other. And this is an important advantage in many cases. As we discussed previously, fields are system-wide, so as soon as you make a change, it's seen and it affects everyone that's looking at that field. But in a lot of cases, you want per user or perhaps per room values, and variables are a very good way to do that. Let's say, for instance, you had a do not disturb option such that incoming alerts might be either spoken or suppressed depending on that do not disturb setting. And a variable would be very useful for that because the user is going to make a choice. You need to remember what that choice is so that you can respond to it when alerts come in, and you would probably want to display to the user the choice that he's made. So you need to have a persistent value to store that in, but you also want to have one per touchscreen client so that each person can have their own setting. So for instance, let's go look at the interface viewer again. And this is very similar to the field one above. We have a Boolean image here, but in this case, it's associated with a global variable. And I have a checkbox similar to above that just toggles the value of that variable. So when I flip the variable, the widget immediately responds. But importantly, on each individual touchscreen, this light would only see changes in the variable made on that particular touchscreen. So it provides you with that local value that you can use over time. So that is the big advantage of variables and why you would use them in certain circumstances. Static widgets have their own internal value. So there's no external value that is seen by anyone else. It's just within the individual widget and it responds to its own internal state. You can change that state by sending it a command. And you could, if you wanted to, actually go back and read out the value, and that is often done, but not in the same way that, for instance, with the field or variable-based ones where there's another widget that immediately reacts to a change. That would not typically be the case because you would have to continuously poll the value of the static widget, and that's not very practical to do. So that raises, of course, the question of what is the purpose of them? And the most common use for them is to use them as input mechanisms to get options from the user, where you want to first get a set of options, and only when the user is happy with them, and perhaps when you've validated that they all make sense, and then you would like to accept them and apply them. So these static widgets allow you to just maintain local visible values that the user has set, but without affecting anything else. You might want to eventually put these values into variables or into fields, but until you're ready and you know that they're all good, you don't want to do that, because as soon as you do that, they're seen by other things, and you don't want that to happen in many cases. So for instance, if you were going to get a set of options from the user for, let's say, how does he want to have lights changed in his room over time or upon motion or that sort of thing, you would like to get them all, make sure they're good, and then let him say, okay, I want to save these now. And then you can just go to each of the static widgets, read out their state, and apply them in whatever way is appropriate. You might write them to a file, you might write them to a field, whatever would be appropriate for your needs. So that's typically how you would use static widgets. Of course, in some cases, they really, really are static, and you're just using them for a decorative purpose, and they don't ever really change, or a label and that sort of thing. But they can also be used in this sort of way. So here, for instance, I have a static Boolean widget, which is similar to all the ones above, except this one just has its own internal state. And this checkbox here, all it's really doing is just sending a command to the static widget saying change your state from true to false. So if we go over to the interface viewer, and you can see how quickly it happens, because it's just a direct, immediate command. Whereas up here, you'll tend to get a little bit of a delay, because it has to go out to the device and then come back and be seen. So whereas these are quite instant. So that's it. Those are the 3 types of widgets, and those are generally how you would use them. And you will probably see this done in many of the examples that will come in later videos.